It was a Tuesday afternoon when Claire Bennett found the piece of paper that would end her marriage. It wasn't a love letter. It wasn't a text message left open on a phone. It was a single bank statement, sitting at the bottom of a drawer her husband told her never to touch. 12 years of marriage. 2 kids. A house they'd built together from nothing. And one folded piece of paper that proved almost none of it had been real. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how a woman can share a bed with a man for over a decade. This wasn't a man who got sloppy. This was a man who built an entire second life with the same discipline he used to build his first one. And for 12 years, he never slipped. Not once. The first crack didn't even look like a crack. It was small. Almost nothing. 3 years before the bank statement, Claire was helping Daniel pack for one of his regular trips to a city he visited so often she'd stopped asking why, when she noticed something odd in his suitcase. A child's drawing. Crayon, the kind a young kid makes, folded into a small square and tucked into the inside pocket like he didn't want it crushed. She asked about it. He laughed it off. Said one of his co-workers had a daughter, and the office had done some kind of bring your kid to work thing, and someone had handed it to him as a joke. It was such a strange, specific lie that it actually worked. Who makes that up unless it's true? Claire let it go. But some small, quiet part of her remembered it. Women usually do. Over the next 2 years, more small things stacked up, the kind of details you'd only notice if you were already paying attention, which Claire wasn't. Not yet. Daniel started taking calls in the garage instead of the living room. He upgraded his phone and set a new passcode he hadn't had before. Their joint credit card statement, the one Claire rarely looked at because Daniel handled the finances, started showing slightly higher charges on his trip weeks. Restaurant dinners for 2. A toy store. A children's clothing boutique that had nothing to do with Sophie or Mason's sizes. When she asked about the children's clothing charge, he told her it was a gift for his sister's kid. Claire didn't talk to her sister-in-law often enough to know that wasn't true. There was one more moment, about a year before everything came out, that Claire didn't understand until much later. A neighbor mentioned, almost in passing, that she'd seen Daniel at a school football game 2 towns over. On a weekend, he'd told Claire he was at a sales conference. Claire actually laughed when she heard it. She told the neighbor she must have the wrong man. It was such a confident, easy laugh that the neighbor laughed along with her and never brought it up again. That's the kind of trust 12 years buys a person. Even when the truth was standing right in front of her, dressed up as a stranger's mistake, Claire's mind simply refused to go there. This is the part of the story that's hardest for people to hear. Daniel wasn't reckless. He was patient. He kept his stories simple, consistent, and boring enough that no one would dig deeper. That's the actual skill of a long-term betrayal. Not lying once well, but lying the same small way for years without ever changing the story. The thing that finally broke, it wasn't suspicion. It was an accident. Daniel's company switched payroll providers, and during the transition, a new financial document landed in their home mailbox instead of his work email, a year-end summary tied to an account Claire had never seen before. It wasn't from his company. Daniel went to sleep, the same way he'd spent 12 years quietly building a life she knew nothing about. What she found was this. In a city 3 hours away, one of the cities on Daniel's regular route, there was a woman named Monica Reyes and an 11-year-old boy named Eli, who believed Daniel was his father, because he was. Daniel had a second house there, smaller than the one Claire lived in, but real. School photos. A dentist. A pediatrician. A whole functioning family that ran exactly opposite his work schedule, so neither side ever crossed paths. 12 years. 2 houses. 2 women who each believed they were his only one. When Claire finally confronted him, she didn't do it with screaming. She put the bank statement on the kitchen table, the same table where they'd eaten dinner with their kids 1,000 times, and asked him one question. Who is Eli? Daniel stood in the doorway for what Claire later said felt like a full minute, saying nothing. She didn't repeat the question. She just waited, the way you wait for someone to finish drowning instead of pulling them out, because some part of her needed to see exactly how far he would let the silence go before he answered. He's my son, Daniel finally said. Not, I can explain. Not, it's not what it looks like. Just a flat, quiet admission, like he'd been carrying the sentence around for years, waiting for someone to finally ask the right question so he could put it down. Daniel has told a few different versions of what happened after that, depending on who's asking. But everyone agrees on one thing. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. The paper in front of him did the talking the moment Claire pointed at it. He tried to explain. He said it had gotten out of control. He said he'd meant to end it years earlier. He said Monica didn't know about Claire either, that as far as she understood, Daniel was a divorced man who traveled for work and visited on weekends. Whether that part was true or just another piece of a story he'd been telling for over a decade, no one could say for certain anymore. A man who can lie convincingly for 12 years doesn't get the benefit of the doubt in year 13, but what happened next moved fast, the way these things often do once the truth is finally sitting out in the open. Claire filed for divorce within the month. When her lawyers subpoenaed his full financial records, the picture got even worse. Daniel hadn't just been splitting his income. He'd been quietly underreporting it to Claire for years, claiming smaller bonuses than he actually received, funneling the difference into the account that supported his second family. Money that should have gone toward their mortgage, their kids' college funds, their retirement, had instead been paying rent and school tuition for a child Claire never knew existed. When Monica found out the truth, that the man she'd built a life with for over a decade had a wife, 2 other kids, and a house 3 hours away, she didn't defend him either. She had spent 11 years believing she was raising Eli with a man who was simply private about his past, a man who told her his ex-wife had moved away and rarely called. She had planned birthdays around his work schedule. She had defended his absences to her own family. By most accounts, she was just as blindsided as Claire was, and in some ways more so. She had built her entire adult life around a man who didn't legally exist the way she thought he did. 2 women, each certain they were his only family, both married in every way that mattered except the legal one. In the end, Daniel lost almost everything that money had built. The divorce settlement, combined with the back pay owed to Monica for over a decade of unacknowledged child support, took nearly all of his assets. The house Claire and the kids lived in was sold to cover what he owed. He kept his job, but lost his marriage, his second family's trust, and any version of the steady, reliable reputation he'd spent his whole life building. Former co-workers who'd known him for years, who'd have vouched for his character without a second thought, stopped returning his calls once the story got out. Here's the detail that still gets people, even now. When this story is told in the divorce paperwork, there's a line listing dependents. For 12 years, Daniel had quietly supported 2 households on one income, splitting himself in half so cleanly that neither woman ever found a single thread to pull. It wasn't a slipped text message that ended it. It wasn't a suspicious phone call, or a moment of guilt, or a friend who saw something they shouldn't have. It was a piece of mail that was never supposed to leave his office in the first place. A single accounting error, in a system change he had nothing to do with. After 12 flawless years of covering his tracks, Claire says, looking back, the hardest part wasn't even the betrayal. It was realizing that the version of her husband she loved for over a decade was a performance built on top of a second, completely different life. The man who sat across from her at dinner every night, who helped Sophie with her homework, who fell asleep next to her every night he was home. He was real. But so was the other one. He just made sure the 2 never met. If there's one thing this story leaves you with, it's this. The people who get away with the longest betrayals aren't the ones who lie the loudest. They're the ones who lie the most consistently. The same small, boring story, repeated for years, until no one thinks to question it anymore. It took 12 years for the truth to surface. It took one piece of paper to end it completely. If stories like this one are the kind you can't look away from, this channel is full of them. Real financial secrets, hidden debts, and the moments people finally got caught. Subscribe so the next one doesn't pass you by.